Hello, concerned people of the world. This is Gamer1745, and we're going to be taking a look at the Ukraine-Russian war, Putin's war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, however you want to call it. I don't know what his history is going to end up calling this. And after we do that, we're also going to be looking at the, Taiwan Crisis, as it might be currently called, and that is actually giving me more current worries. Excuse me. Wow, me currently here in the U.S. more worries. I'm sure there's more worries by people in Ukraine. What's going on for the Ukraine? But before we get into all of that, gotta say, if you're new around here, love for you to hit that subscribe button so I can see you here more often. And I hope with everybody I'm hitting that like button, and I'm sure Brady has already hit. Sure, Brady Lawson, long-time viewer here, can't stay too long. I understand, Brady. Now, if you have any questions, please post them, and I will do my best to answer them regarding either Taiwan or Ukraine. And I do have stuff prepared that I'm going to talk about during this, but I am very much keeping this as, if you're watching later, as a chat with viewers that have comments, questions, concerns, information, whatever. So I will be responding to that. But first, I wanted to take a look here with the update currently. Now, I want to say straight up, I don't trust anybody's information on what's going on in Ukraine, because it is still very much in that period of fog of war. And all sides, because there's more than just two, all sides in this conflict have an agenda. Whether I agree with the agenda or disagree, they have an agenda. So they're going to highlight that agenda. So we have to keep that in mind here. And so this is but I think I don't know, like I say, I don't trust, but a good source of information is the British Ministry of Defense. I follow their Twitter account, and multiple times a day they update their, and we will be looking at some of their updates, their current understanding of what's going on in the Ukraine. So I'm not saying it's objective, because they, even in their basic Twitter feed headline, says we stand with Ukraine or whatever. So obviously they are partisan. I'm not, again, saying it's incorrect. Just keep that in mind. And hello, Arno. Very good to have you watching everywhere. Do absolutely appreciate it. Okay, so into the meat of this. This is yesterday's map that they published. Blue lines are likely Ukrainian advances. Red, or arrows, or however you want to call them, lines, arrows. Red are Russian likely advances. Likely access of advance here, whatever. But in current boundaries of controlled and contested areas. So I think that's the nuclear. I'm not great on the details of, I know Sevastopol, Yalta, Kharkov, Kiev is up this way. I do know the general geography, but not detailed. So we have this here. I would say roughly, okay, my estimation of the original intention was like a 4-day aggressive war, and then the war was going to be over. So now what was going to happen after that war? I think they were going to install or reinstall a, and I may slip up sometimes here today, call it Soviet, but putting a Russian puppet in Kiev. I don't think it was like, direct annexation of Ukraine to Russia, but I do believe this territory was roughly to be a direct annexation of territory to Russia, and the rest set up as a puppet state. That's my evaluation of the situation there, of the goals of Putin. So keep that in mind. Now, today's update here, and we will look at some of this. Since August 29th, 2020, the Ukrainian armed forces have been conducting a renewed offensive operation in the south of Ukraine. One element of this offensive is an ongoing advance on the broad front of the western Dnipro River, focusing on 3 axes of Russian-occupied Kherson Oblast, or region, I believe that would be the rough translation. The operation has limited immediate objectives, but Ukrainian forces have likely achieved a degree of tactical surprise, exploiting poor logistics, administration, and leadership of the Russian armed forces. That is a very big problem, is administration and particularly leadership of the Russian armed forces is very poor, has been seen. With fighting also continuing on the Donbass and Kharkov sectors. Okay, so we're talking Kherson down here, Donbass and Kharkov up over here, just to give everyone an idea. A key decision for Russian commanders in the coming days will be where to commit any operational reserves they can generate. Yes, Russia is having a significant manpower problem. Let's see what Arno's saying here. The Russians are performing underwhelming. Even without weapons from the West, the Russians would have gotten further, but not likely wanted to what they originally were going after. Yes, haven't. Okay, well, on objectives, yes, the initial objective of domination, I guess that would be a good term, of Ukraine has utterly and completely failed. And I think it's $13 billion or something additional to everything else. Biden is now asking for more money for Ukraine. Well, I don't know. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I don't know that the West needs to put any more significant resources into, and we will look at some of the stuff here, into Ukraine, because the West has already achieved its goal. Not won the war or anything, but it achieves its goal. And what is the goal of the West? And there's mission creep there. Hello from the Philippines, or hello from the U.S. to the Philippines. Hello, Michael Arnez. Good to have you here. Hope I'm getting that right. We will be talking about Taiwan, the Philippines, and whatnot a bit later. So, Michael over on Facebook, if you want to stay around for that, we will be getting to that very important topic soon. Be a bit, but we will get there. The goal was to stop Russian, or Putin, or however you want to say it, expansionism. That is, my understanding, is the West's goal, is to stop expansionism. Well, we've done that. I don't know what the final boundary situation is going to be with Ukraine, but the this has massively exhausted Russia, and will stop for the foreseeable future, in my opinion, expansion into places like the Baltic states and others, Poland, wherever, down in Georgia, way down here. So we've achieved that goal. We've stopped, what my big concern is expansion further and further west, or potentially in other directions. So that is an important goal. We've achieved that goal. Russia is exhausted. Had Germany's invasion of either something like Czechoslovakia or Poland taken this long and still not achieved, conquest of Warsaw, and the Soviets hadn't invaded the eastern half of Poland. Had the Poles still had the eastern half of Poland, Hitler's regime probably would have survived if there hadn't been a general war with the West. But the idea of Hitler expanding, and also hello, Lord Samuel, their general expansion of the war or German territory would have stopped at that point, even if eventually they would have won in Poland. It had been a long, exhausting war that would have stopped Hitler. And, it's partly the goal of what's going on then and now. So we've done that. That is achieved. Now, talking to some people and reading articles, we can also see here, and hello, Poop Hunter, I was stoked to see Ukraine doing an offensive. Yes. Let's look at, I have a story prepared for that one that we can talk about here. Russia failed in their lightning war and bogged down into a war of attrition. Absolutely, that's exactly what's happened. It is a combination. Yeah, it's a war of attrition, which is also an insurgency that they're having to deal with as well. So, Kherson counteroffensive, cheered by Ukrainians enduring Russian rule, is the headlines of this Financial Times. Just to give you my sources here on this Financial Times article, and it was filed or updated or whatever yesterday. So just to give time here, it was the news many in Kherson waited to hear, blah blah blah, the pro-Ukrainian activity of those who remain. I'm not planning on reading all this, but I want to take a quick look at what they're talking about here. Kherson remains the only provincial Ukrainian capital captured intact by the Russian forces since President Vladimir Putin's full invasion of the country in February. It's, according to this, a hotbed of resistance and partisan activity. Again, these are people that have been in the region. This week, there are rumors that Kirill Stemenos, I'm probably butchering, Moscow appointed governor of Kherson, has fled after he recorded a geological video from the hotel in Russia. Okay, but the extent of the Ukrainian count remains unclear. Right, like I say, everything is the fog of war. It has left the Russian military bloggers who claim, and I already had somebody talk to me about this. I think the term was crazy, but they used who claim Russia's suicide attack is failing without offering evidence. To fill the information gaps. And there's a lot of information war going on. Again, I want to stress, I have a viewpoint here. I have a who I'm more for versus other people. I don't claim to be nonpartisan in this, but I will try my best to give you the best evaluation of what is actually going on. And so the fact that we're not taking Kherson yet does not mean the Operation South has stalled or failed. Advisor to President Zelensky's administration. Locals swim the Dnieper River, pausing when an explosion goes off to see where the smoke is. Yeah. Okay, so what I wanted to say about this is I don't think this attack, whether it's an offensive or counteroffensive, is meant to throw the Russians out of Ukraine, and it's only a bad idea if the offensive is pursued against targets that are causing high casualty rates, meaning if you do a coordinated, and it does seem to be a coordinated offensive, and you hit a lot of places, you don't have to push hard on your offensive. You just hit them and see where the collapses happen. See where the platoon that's dug in somewhere that falls back, or the platoon that isn't dug in gets pushed back. So the offensive keeps the enemy having to react to you instead of you waiting to react to them. So I think that idea, if it's put out there, as a probing attack, not as a determined push on a specific objective, is a very good idea. Is flatland, and so it's kind of surprising. Yeah. And hello, Karen May Noro Gono. Sorry, I'm probably butchering it. Hello from the General Santos, Philippines. Can't watching your stream. Sorry to hear you can't watch the stream, but thanks for showing up. Wonder how it will go. Yeah. One thing for sure is Russian logistics will be way worse than the fact that the Ukrainian army is more limited or more united than at the start of the war. Yes. Ukraine is fractionalized. So what we're seeing, in my opinion, is the distracting, the needing to Russian pushing is pushed over here. Let's push back here. What is Russia going to do with its reinforcements, shall we call it? Are they going to add them to the push over here, or are they going to send them over here to stabilize the front line? That is my understanding of the goals and objectives from what it looks like. And I know it's very scant evidence of it. Russia kind of needs to do what Lord Samuel's saying, what the Soviet Union did in their counteroffensive against the Third Reich when they were on the defensive. Yes. Hello, Spanner and the work. The offensive is shorter supply lines than into the Donbass, and it pulls pressure off. Yes, it does pull pressure off the other parts of Ukraine, most certainly. And looking at supply lines, this is where I was going to go. So I look at what little we know of the offensive. It seems like a good idea. It seems like a way to give a morale boost to the Ukrainian army, to the Ukrainian people, that we're doing something, so long as it isn't pushed too hard, too recklessly, shall we say. Now, this is something that I was concerned about. Here they're calling it. This is again from the Eurasian Times. I don't know much about this source, either updated or the original article is from August 3rd. I know it had been out. Okay. The Panzerhaubitze 2000s, the really nice Germans, I really like these howitzers, are breaking down in the fight against Russia. Ukraine informs Berlin of defects. With Ukraine reporting having lost several U.S.-supplied high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, and the M777 lightweight howitzers, while losing nearly all of its Soviet-era artillery munitions, the military prospects for Kiev look bleak. I disagree with this. I think, like I said, I don't know the source, but I think it has the opposite agenda of what's going on, or the Russian agenda in mind. According to Der Spiegel report, mid-June, Kiev had informed Berlin about some of the 7 Panzerhaubitze 2000 tracked self-propelled artillery delivered late in June were malfunctioning and urgent need of repair. Snags emerged after extensive shelling of Russian positions for more than 100 shells a day. Okay. What I'm concerned with This map is prettier to look at. Not as reckless as Doolittle rate. Well, the Doolittle rate, I think, would be the definition or the demonstration of recklessness at its core. So the supply lines, as Spanner and the work talks about. Well, the supply lines of Ukraine are longer than the supply lines for Russia, because the supply lines for Ukraine are all over the, go to the United States and to Europe. I don't know, to the rest of Europe. I don't know if they're importing anything produced in other parts of the world. And by supply lines, I mean wherever, and I don't quite know, I could figure it out, I'm sure, the Lockheed Martin plant that's making the NLAW missiles. That's their supply line. Is from that Lockheed Martin plant that is right now today. I know it's Saturday, but they're very well likely producing NLAW missiles. If not, they will be producing them on Monday. That they're producing. It's from that plant to Kherson Oblast. Okay, that is the supply lines of Ukraine. The supply lines for Russia is somewhere in Russia, whether it's Moscow or a lot of factories are to the east of Moscow, where they're producing the Russian munitions to the front. So, and through the war-torn countries, the supply line is actually longer through Ukraine, because although currently much of Ukraine, I think, outside of the areas highlighted in this graphic here, are at relative peace. At least that's what I get from my contacts in Ukraine, meaning they're not facing daily airstrikes or continuing attacks in other parts of Ukraine. That they have to move them from, say, the Polish border up to the front, where the Russians come to, over here. And I'm guessing, I'm not sure, regional boundaries. I guess these sort of reddish lines are railways. It seems like it, because they go to towns. So railways to here. So the supply lines. Now, again, talking to some people, and I do have one good contact in Ukraine. Don't want to specify more. He knows who he is, and he's been open here, but I don't need to tag him more publicly. Talked to him 2 days ago on some information along these lines. And the problem for both sides is exhausting supplies of munitions, more so than people on Ukraine side, and we'll get on to that in a moment, but is the consumption of munitions. At the start of this, and I keep using this because I have hard numbers on this, at the start of this conflict, or within the first couple of weeks, Lockheed Martin stated, they gave the exact number, but it was just a little over 6,000 NLAW missiles were produced a year at full capacity production. And I don't think that full capacity of production means 24/7. I think it means 5 days a week, 8 or 10 hours a day or something like that. In a peacetime production. And at that point, I don't know that they've I don't know if they've upped production from that, seeing that the war is lasting longer. And so what we're seeing here is the West selling or giving, I don't know all the definitions of that, how much is, because part of the way it works is the U.S. will give $13 billion in aid to Ukraine. Now, maybe $1 billion of it is flown in on cash and goes into somebody's Swiss bank account, because there have been people that have fled Ukraine and have been caught, including politicians' wives, have been caught with multi-millions of dollars in their luggage of euros and US dollars as they've left the country. So some of it may be going into corruption, and trust me, the Ukrainian government has been very, very corrupt. I'm not sure which government, the Russian or the Ukrainian, has greater levels of corruption in it, but both of them are very corrupt. But it's not so much that Ukraine is given, like I say, $13 billion, and then what do they want to spend it on? No, it's more like, okay, we need to give Ukraine $13 billion, so they spend it with Lockheed Martin to buy, and I'm just using these as a real world example, the NLAW missile. So those, and the NLAW missile, is $1 billion. No, a few $100,000 or whatever it is per missile. And so they're buying however many missiles, as well as other things, obviously, too. So, what are all of the costs in there? So the technicality is that the U.S. is giving money to Ukraine, and Ukraine is buying weapons with that money. So we might technically be selling them the missiles, but we're giving them the money to buy the missiles with. So it's sort of that circular argument there. And with that, that can't continue at the current rate of exhaustion. Because there just isn't enough production. We've looked at the Panzerhaubitze 2000. I often don't understand nations. The Dutch, 10 years ago, was trying to offload some of their Panzerhaubitze 2000s and sell them. And they're having trouble at the time finding customers for it. I don't know if it was those or whether they were German PZH 2000s that Canada leased, didn't buy, they leased them to go use them in Afghanistan. So they were flown into Afghanistan and used. And there again, so these may be the exact same howitzers, maybe, I'm not sure, that Ukraine is using, meaning that they had served in Afghanistan. I don't understand why the Dutch want. I understand why the nation, because they look like, the next 2 or 3 years we're not going to be likely invaded. We don't need as many artillery units, so let's downscale our army. I get that idea, but I don't understand why selling off weapon systems that, when people really start needing weapon systems, they're worth more than gold. And so, I understand why you would mothball them, put them away in sheds somewhere so they don't, deteriorate, and store them up instead of keep them in service and pay the soldiers to work them. So operate them. So I understand budgets and reducing budgets, but I didn't understand why they wanted to sell the equipment. Yes, thanks, Arno. Please do give this stream an upvote if you're on YouTube, and anywhere else you can just hit the follow or subscribe button. Road's not the worst. Corruption in Ukraine, I'm shocked. Yes, very much from Casablanca. On our movie night a week ago, we watched Casablanca. Ukraine got equipment in bad condition too, from nearby country. Yes, and so a lot of countries, now Poland and others, were wanting to give up their equipment with the idea of getting new equipment, more modern equipment, from either West Germany or the United States. Oh, I said West Germany. From Germany or the United States. That I understand, you're trying to turn over your surplus equipment. Now, armies, nations often like big shiny toys. So Panzerhaubitze 2000s or whatever, and they're really cool to have. But do you really... Is it better to give the Ukrainians a howitzer or 100 drones? You know, not the big expensive American drones, but smaller drones that you can put like a mortar bomb or something that you can drop from that drone. You know, let's say 1,000 drones, because drones are, you know, those howitzers are expensive, and all those 155 millimeter rounds are expensive. So would it be better to have one Panzerhaubitze 2000 or 1,000 drones that you can put into the field and get close enough to, you just got to get close enough, and some of them can have several miles of range, that you fly over your enemy and push the drop button, and a 80 millimeter mortar round goes boom right down on the enemy that you were looking at. So we can, with that simple demonstration, what is going to be, and realize the immensity of this front line here. You know, 9, 10, 24 Panzerhaubitze 2000s. Hell, if I start up here and drive down to here, half of them are just going to break down from driving, even if they were in like new condition. So they're not going to be able to affect a huge portion of the front line. So I've often wondered, and I don't blame the Ukrainians for going, hey, yeah, you'll give us these and you'll train to a degree, because I'm sure they're rushing through the training service, and I'm sure they're not maintaining the vehicles as well, and then of course spare parts for the things that break, for whatever equipment it is that you're going to have. So how useful, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have them, I'm not saying they have no use, but how overall useful are 24 or less, because there's like 9 or whatever that they were given, and I don't know if they're going to get more. How useful are these howitzers? Yeah, at a particular offensive they may be very useful, but in the overall war, wouldn't it be better to buy drones? Because we will be looking at drones when it comes to China here shortly. The drones are going to be damned effective. If they get shot down, you just lose them, you haven't even lost a person. And they don't have good countermeasures at all, but they definitely don't have the equivalent of a HARM missile, meaning an anti-radiation missile. Those are designed to launch, and I know a lot of you know this, but not everybody does. To launch the missile, and it homes in on radars, to blow up radars to keep attacking aircraft safe. You destroy the radars, it's safer to fly in your attacking aircraft. So I don't think anybody has developed effective battlefront counter missiles that are looking for drone radio signals and home in on them and blow up the operator. Let's see what Arno's saying. My government wanted to save money. They have been doing that since the 1990s. Yes, in 97 we lost our 1st Infantry Division, and a couple of years later our tank, and now they're shitting their pants and want to buy more and more. Yes, they back in the 90s they thought history was over and the need for large-scale militaries was done. Sure, an expeditionary force to, I don't know, go save your ships and crew members that have been captured by pirates in Somalia or some equivalency, so special forces that rescue some Dutch people somewhere in some, African country or whatever might be needed in the future, but big infantry divisions and armored divisions were no longer needed. I know that was the thinking, and it reinforces the idea that the American puppets in Europe's called states are just that, meaning all you Western Europeans, you're just American puppets. there is, in fact, that equipment are more expensive to make and buy. Oh, yes. Well, it was like during the latter part of the Cold War, the amount of square footage to make the peacetime amount of expensive late Cold War aircraft was approximately equal to what it was at the peak of World War II in making those massive spamming out of aircraft. And of course, the aircraft, both time and cost, it spiraled up since then. So yeah, it's very expensive, and a lot of new tech got introduced during the war. So I guess I don't need to belabor this point. Is that the technical levels of the equipment appropriate for Ukraine needs to be taken better in account for it, and continue to dump money into Ukraine in unlimited batches is, I think, a mistake. Now, also, this is the other thing here that is concerning here I wanted to bring up here is heavy fighting continues in southern Ukraine, including shelling of the Indauer district near the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And yes, that is here on this map. Despite war in Ukraine, September Russian military exercises. Oh, and this is here. And I wanted to highlight. So yes, the nuclear power plant needs to have power going to it at all times to circulate water, to keep it from overheating, and it's best that that doesn't happen. I mean, best that it keeps the power on there, and so that's a problem. And then for you Europeans, because I was in and around Europe when the Chernobyl, well, it was after the Chernobyl thing happened, but the waste clouds of nuclear whatever coming over Europe, that it blows into Europe. So yeah, you in Europe will get the effects of it. Despite the war, Russia's standard military exercise, Volks 22, the annual joint strategic exercises marking the culmination of military training year, Russia publicly claimed 50,000 troops will take part. However, it's unlikely more than 15,000 personnel will actively be involved. Now, my understanding that this, from other readings, if I'm putting this all together right, is a multinational training force that normally has India and several other of the near abroad nations involved in it. This year they added China, which I think is interesting, because China and India are on a near war footing at the moment. So I don't know if that's going to continue as it has in the past, because of India and China both participating in, but we see China moving closer. But this is likely to be a lot less personnel involved, and Russia's military performance in Ukraine has highlighted the Russian military strategic exercises such as Vostok have failed to sustain the military's ability to conduct large-scale complex operations. Such events are highly scripted, do not encourage initiative, and primary aim is to impress Russian leaders and international audiences. Yes, and I think much of the exercises that they conduct is that they get ready the forces that are going to participate in them, and those do well. I don't think overall the training levels of the Russian military have been very good. At our height, we had over 900 tanks, thousands, this is Arno saying, thousands of armored vehicles and artilleries, 210 F-16s, a standing army of over 200,000 men. For a small country, that's big. Now we have 30,000 men and 52 Panzerhaubützen and 18 tanks. Do you see that? And it was a big downsizing. Absolutely. The USA did that in Iraq and Afghanistan too, handing out bags of money all over the place. Never looked too hard at who was getting it. Well, we'll see there they were handing out, I think it was, whether you want to call it bribing money or money to sustain militias, I think would be looking at that they were just handing it out locally, and it's a Middle Eastern tactic. It was to keep the local allies supplied with things like money to give them to pay their supporters for them to buy food and pay the rent and whatnot. I think maybe we can add the fact that Russia doesn't have an NCO corps too. Yeah, I don't. Their NCO, they do have one, but it's not a very effective one, shall we say. That is a very problem. Which is a NCO. See, this is. I had a real we lost contact. He moved back east. But I had for years a really good friend who was a Marine Corps NCO. Ended up in counterintelligence in the Marine Corps and then sort of an Arab area specialist doing that kind of stuff. So, very good NCO. He was very enamored of the Israeli system in which basically everybody starts out as privates and then you work your way up the officer chain. I took time to me who only had some ROTC training, try to explain that is not a good system for large forces. And again, he's a Marine Corps guy, so he's looking at a relatively small force. I mean, there's 100,000+ of them, but a relatively small force in looking at the Marine Corps. That you don't want to have too old of generals or too out of date generals, so you want them to start as lieutenants. Because he always complained that he only knew like 2 good officers or 2 or 3, I forget what the number is. One of them was a VMI graduate, the other one was from Annapolis, which most Marine Corps officers aren't. And he was dealing with lieutenants and captains, and lieutenant is there just to sort of make sure that the orders get done and learned. That's his job. It's the NCO job to actually run the platoon, to actually in combat or whatever else. It's the NCO's job. You shouldn't really have to have a lieutenant there, because the NCOs are supposed to know the job better than the lieutenant. So the lieutenant is thus there to learn what's going on and to make sure that when captain or major so-and-so gives some orders, that they actually get followed and not goofed off or whatever. So NCOs are a critical element, but NCOs, once you get good NCOs, they should not become officers, because they are NCOs, not officers. So, and officers are supposed to get good at maybe captain, but definitely majors and above. You're supposed to, weed out the not so goods and train up them. So that is that. Hello, Eric. Good to have you here. An effective NCO corps is way better for large scale, and incompetent NCO corps flexibility is in tactics. Yeah, well, the Soviets, and I use that term appropriately, Soviets were known to have very, very inflexible tactics, and very much seen as such in the Afghanistan war that they fought. So they're not very flexible in doing anything. So yeah, that is an important element. Now, we're all seeing Russia's failure here. I mean, this is an utter failure, of course, as we talked about earlier on, with the invasion of Ukraine that was supposed to be like 4 days of active campaign, and then the rest would be, mopping up exercises. That once this war is concluded, to whatever degree it's going to be concluded, I think a lot of people, and particularly politicians, and most of them have no military experience nowadays, are going to conclude that Russia is a paper tiger, or not really dangerous, so they can go back to the Dutch where hello, Beamslam, good to have you here. The Soviets have political commissars. That's also another problem too. But As Arno was saying, go back to, oh, hey, yeah, and like I say, the Russian expansion has been stopped. And that isn't stopped for history, it's stopped for the foreseeable future. But they're going to go back to, we don't need to spend too much on the military. Well, what happens after this type of situation, and this is more than, because, again, I think it was my Ukrainian friend pointed out that, well, after the I always blank on names, the not Azerbaijan, sorry, chat, maybe you can help me out, the Russian war against the Islamic minorities down here in the Caucasus region. Sorry, I'm blanking on it. I do this once in a while. I don't know why on names. Where they were in there, that showed a lot of their deficiencies there. And I'm not thinking of Georgia. I'm thinking going after the Muslim group, the one that sent some mercenaries recently into Ukraine. And that didn't set up a reform wave in Russia. Well, the border countries like Poland, for example, may strengthen. Oh, well, the border countries are. Oh, yes, the border countries are. But I think a lot of the Western politicians, not Eastern or Central European politicians, whatever you want to call it now, but the Western politicians are going to be lulled into a false sense of security. Because I think, well, either, I mean, maybe nothing is going to happen. Not Georgia, Spanner, but I believe it starts with a. It was the Muslim, not Azerbaijan, not Armenia. The one that back in the 90s. No, not Syria. That's the Russian invasion down in the Caucasus. The ones that produce all the terrorists that like went after the Russian opera house and whatnot. You guys may have forgotten the name too, or even forgotten the war. Well, you often after the bad performance here, and I think a lot of it is to do with corruption in the Russian military. UN Security Council is fucking useless because of the veto power. Well, the U.S., yeah, UN is useless. The UN, yeah, not ISIS. Hello, Yoshihisa. But sorry, I'm blanking on things. Here, is with this such wide-scale failure, I think it very well might be seen as a a catalyst for reform in the Russian military. So in 20 years, Chechnya, that's it. Thanks, Beamslam. Chechnya, that's what I was blanking on. Thank you. I always blank on these things. Yeah, the Chechen wars. Thank you, Beamslam. Somebody got it. Good. Thank you. Yeah, I sort of know what I'm talking about, but I don't know. There's particular names. For some reason, I get there. Yes, Chechnya. I think that 20 years from now, we may see a very, very different. However it's spelled. Yes, but yeah, you get that. There's I think multiple spellings because translating Cyrillic into Western letters don't have always a defined set of spelling. Posted it out. Okay, cool. Yes, Eric went to visit a military aircraft museum today, or at least partially. He's posted some of those, and I hope there'll be some in our forum on Discord here. So yes, I see that he has. So if you want to check out our Discord, I think it should be linked around forum. There's a lot of interesting things going on there. You can see his photos from his visit today. Russia's doing what the USSR did during the war, reforming their military during the war. Yes, Okay, yeah, Lord Samuel, and exactly because as particularly Eric I know has pointed out, and we'll get to this just a second. Is this is sort of the equivalent of the Winter War for the Soviet Union, uh, invasion of Finland leading up to World War II. This is sort of the Winter War for Russia. Now, I was asked, and let's see, I think I have. There we go. Let's look down here. Russian bot here who. Despite my name, I am a neutral in the war. However, I feel the need to be serious, look into Western media in Ukraine when it comes to how hush-hush they're being about losses. Okay. They're keeping it under lock and key in Russia, he very much admits. Every time I look Ukrainian losses, their army, I find an article, 1 out of 1,000 for their problem. The DPR, as of August 8th, listed the Ukrainian losses as 197,000 losses or higher. The DPR is one of the breakaway factions in eastern Ukraine, and still puts higher losses than the Pentagon. Pentagon puts 80,000 Russians lost in this fight. So I asked my Ukrainian friend his opinion, and he did a little bit of digging. And from official Ukrainian sources for military losses, put it approximately 9,000. And they put at about 100,000 for Russian losses. He thought Russian losses at 80,000 was a bit light on losses. So that is basically 10 to 1 in military losses. So that great name, Russia. Yeah, I think it's meant to be ironic, and not that he's a pro-Russian, as he says. I don't know. So yes, we have, and there's been other civilian losses here. Now, what I will say, and okay, 9,000. So probably that number. Well, I'm sure that number is not exactly correct, but it's probably less than 15,000. But probably not. Probably, it's probably less than 15,000. It's probably not more. I mean, it's probably not more than 15,000, and it's probably not less than 9,000 military losses. Now, if they'd even been equivalent losses, it still doesn't so much matter, because so long, it's the price of having a nation, people. The U.S., at least up until, I think all of the wars up until like the Vietnam War, all the casualties in all the wars that the U.S. fought, except for the American Civil War, all of the wars put together, all the American casualties, and I think included the Revolutionary War, were less casualties than in the American Civil War. The American Civil War had more casualties than their losses in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, the American Revolutionary War, the War of 1812. We lost more because with the Civil War, it's losses on both sides that were counted, Confederate as well as Union losses. That was the highest casualties, and I don't even know if we've yet caught up to the casualties in there. And so, but that was, a war fought to keep our nation together, the Civil War. So wars are the cost of having a nation. A lot of people have forgotten this. So, if this is Winter War Redux, Barbarossa 2 is only 2 years away. Well, Yeah, if it's that kind of thing. But like I was saying earlier, Spanner, in the work, I think the West has stalled out Russian expansionism now for the next. I think for Putin's term, because he's an old guy. I don't think we're going to see him rushing into the Baltic states, which I would have. Had he had his 4-day war, I think the Baltic states would have been next. So I think that has been stalled out. I don't think we're going to see any Russian expansion outside of whatever might be happening in Ukraine for the foreseeable future. Well, about 11,000 of equipment is probably at least 22,000 casualties. Well, we're talking deaths, not wounds here. Casualties. So that's my understanding here. Is we're talking deaths. That number is deaths. So you can probably put the number of casualties, and we even talked about it with my contact again. He might even show up here today. I don't know, but I'm not going to name him just for security reasons. And he's just doing open source research, but he is Ukrainian and is somewhat involved in the military. I don't want to specify at the moment. Nothing high level, is involved as in like platoon level type activities. So I don't even want to make it even if any intelligence services want to start digging into it. No, I've talked to somebody on the ground in there. And I do mean literally talk to, that probably the wounded are 4 times as high. So in the 30 to 40,000 wounded range. So if you're doing that, then they're not related to equipment losses. So my guess is between if you add dead and wounded beam slam, yes. So and more severely wounded. Oh, absolutely. But we were talking dead. It was what we were talking. In that 9,000 number was listed, for KIA, killed in action, was basically that number. So yes, 30 to 40,000, I would put as overall casualties, or a bit more. But okay. So if 10,000 roughly dead, 4,000 or 40,000 wounded or so, then you're getting 50,000. So but that's 80,000 dead Russians is my understanding is the number. So again, a lot higher wound levels. But like I go back, I think is to the equipment, is the supply lines, the equipment is the major limiting factor. Now, what's going to happen in the future? Obviously, I don't know, but some telling things. Yes, I think Russian expansionism has stopped outside of the Ukraine. I think the Ukrainian, Zelensky and others that are, if their public stance, because there's one thing that's public and another thing is private, if their public stance is equal to their private stance that Russia must evacuate all of Ukraine and including Crimea, then that is a mistake at this point. Because I don't think at the current, because Russia could collapse at any moment. It could just collapse. We saw, it starts with a D, the Russian, the daughter of the Russian thinker, Dugin, Russian Dugin, that's right, Dugin, was assassinated. whether it was she was targeted or I think it was he was the target, and I think they just took her as a target of opportunity. Is we could see a coup, we could see some sort of assassination attempt against Putin, we could see a Russian collapse. But barring that, I don't think Russia's going to collapse, and I don't think Russia yet is going to just give up. Now, we have seen the Russians abandon Snake Island down here and open the way for shipping to go in and out of Odessa without molestation. So civilian shipping is now coming in and out of Odessa, and Russia is no longer targeting. So Russia, and there was some agreement to limit Ukrainian strikes against Russian naval assets or something within all that, and I don't know how much of that is going on. So there's talks between Russia and Ukraine and whatever third parties involved in going on with that. So there's probably continuing talks on other subjects. So if Russia is in a weak enough position that they're willing to allow, and I think it's as much as Russia is unable to truly enforce it, so you might as well allow them, commercial shipping in and out of Odessa is a telling factor. So if Zelensky can, get some of his land back and get a some sort of ceasefire or peace agreement, that would be good. And I don't see that as a likelihood so long as the West is continuing to pour in military assets and the money to pay for them in an unrestricted fashion. And I think that is a problem. Time for Japan to take back their rightful clay, doing what they should have been done in World War II. Well, Japan and Russia are now technically back at war because they have broken off their negotiations over the Sakhalin Island and whatnot. So they are at war, though to the best of my knowledge, no shots have been fired, no aggressive actions have been taken by either side. But they are now, since there is no longer a talks or a truce, ongoing talks, they're technically back in conflict, maybe we should say, over with Russia right now. So yeah, that's where we're going to go next, and then coming up. So okay, does anybody else? Let me see. Is there any other? I want to see if I the Pacific, British military defense, German. Okay, I think I've covered all of the points talking about the casualties. I think eventually the scale of casualties will come to Russia, general Russian knowledge. They've had more casualties so far in the Ukraine war than they did during the whole Afghan war of approximately 10 years. So, and that's what really collapsed the Soviet Union as the sort of the final straw. I mean, it was the final log. It wasn't just a straw, but it collapsed it. I don't know if it's enough to collapse the Putin regime, so I think the West needs to start limiting the amount of resupply to the Ukrainians, with the idea that Zelensky and crew must negotiate a settlement, and that is reasonably acceptable. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to get Mariupol back. I don't know if, all the Donbass, which had already sort of been occupied, they're going to get that back. I doubt they're going to get the Ukraine back. But if they can get some of this territory back down here, sort of like Kherson and the eastern half of this area here, I mean western half, sorry, that might be a suitable situation. Oh, one thing I wanted to. Oh, is that over here? No. Okay, that may be here. Let's. No, it isn't there. Okay. Sorry. Um, I'm going to save one, but not seeing it right offhand. Is it? I can't find it quickly. Ah, yes. I think this, I don't know about the wording here, but I think this might be an idea for the future Ukrainian flag, which is sort of merged with the American Gadsden flag, which would have the original sign. I think it's something about Snake Island, but is "Don't Tread on Me" or Snake Island F off flag. But that might be a good symbol for Ukraine going forward as a national identity, as it were. The chats in case somebody is not that. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for Ukraine for today. I am going to now jump to the Taiwan crisis. So if you guys, which I actually think right now are more of a problem going forward than Ukraine, but it's going forward as opposed to immediate. But okay, I'm going to make an episode on it. So again, everyone who's made it this far in the video, because I will be posting this as a standalone video, thank you so much for watching. Please post comments, questions, tips, information below. If you haven't already, please hit that like button, subscribe. Hope to see you around. Hope everyone is safe. I really do.